Welcome back to So Bad It's Good, presented by Betches Media. Today we have a returning guest. This is her fourth time on the show, but I haven't talked to her. It might be a year. Time means nothing anymore. But let me just remind you who she is. Her name is Lauren Clayton. She is an ex-forensic therapist where she did personality profiling and psych assessments for ex-cons, recently released from federal prison. Her interests are in neuroscience, neuroplasticity, and epigenetics, which led her to establishing her private practice in 2010, where she coaches executives and celebrities as an executive leadership coach and integrative health coach. You can find out all the information about her at laurenclaytontotalhealth.com, which I'll put in the show notes. But she is here to help me today, like she's done in the past, make sense of these crazy Vanderpump Rules kids. And we're probably going to talk about the Crazy Valley kids who have now kind of turned into adults. The one, the only, Lauren Clayton, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Ryan. So good to see you again.
Yeah, no, it's great to see you. Sorry that we have to talk about such insanity in terms of the subject matter, but I was talking to you a lot last season during the scandal of it all. And I want to remind people at the very top too, is that what we're not doing, we're not diagnosing anybody, correct?
Mm-hmm.
We're just looking at patterns of behavior and certain things that you've noticed or potentially worked with in your career, which I think can really be so helpful in breaking down some of the behavior that we see on these shows.
Absolutely. And that's why we like these shows, is because we recognize maybe patterns in ourselves, but in other people and other relationships that we have. And we could do this empathizing from afar and see how other people react to it and have this feeling we're not alone. So we're coming at it from that angle and to help you understand what's going on with these people, or, especially there's a lot of narcissistic relationships. And I see a lot of, recovering from narcissistic abuse is a theme in both, more in Vanderpump Rules, but there's a lot of themes of like relationships and male-female dynamics. But with the narcissistic abuse recovery, so many of us have had those experiences. So it's good to just be able to see how all these people are coping or trying to cope, or what stage of grief or processing they're at. So that's all.
You make it sound so simple sometimes about like human behavior, but at the same time, the one thing that I do recognize certain patterns of behavior, my own and other people in these shows. The one thing though that is not normal and kind of throws it and skews it a little bit is that this is all on camera. Even this season of Vanderpump Rules, what we deal with even in this finale is we break the fourth wall and we, acknowledge that we're being filmed. And, Ariana does not want to shoot a scene with Tom Sandoval, nor should she have to. But that's the other thing, is that you have to almost add in being on television on top of this behavior that we see. And what do you think, or what could you guess that being on television adds to this process of trying to be a human?
It definitely makes it more convoluted. And you see that in the last, I don't know if it was episode 14 or 15 is the last one, where they do start talking about, and for instance, you're not going on a trip to San Francisco with your buddies when your ex is, it just wouldn't happen in real life.
It's not fun. Yeah, you wouldn't do this. You would not do this.
You wouldn't, but at the same time, this is part of their job. And I know they get paid for the amount of camera time that they have. So you have to take all those things into consideration. And they're literally working with their ex, right? And then you don't want to. And Ariana is really, there's phases of healing and grief that are going on. And I keep saying grief because the stages of recovering from a relationship like this, which is, I really believe that it's narcissistic abuse recovery from everything that went on. She's getting out of a relationship with a narcissist. You go through the stages of grief. So there's shock, denial, and then anger. And not that any of these things are linear. They can go all over the place, but she's really in the anger phase right now. And I think that people are getting frustrated with her, and it's an uncomfortable place to be in general, like for yourself, for anyone else. But, and I'm not mad at her being in the anger phase. Anger is really important. It's above depression, right? So when you're depressed, which is an important, you have to feel, I think it's important to feel your feelings and not numb out by getting into another relationship immediately, which she is also doing. But, so what I'm saying is that anger phase can, jettison you into living a better life, realizing things about yourself, maybe doing some self-improvement. So if you use that anger to transmute some things in your life that could be better, it's fine. But right now, Ariana's just hitting on this one anger note. And hopefully she'll move out of it, like Lala's been saying.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you say, do you mean also the depression phase would actually kind of just get you to lay there? You know, anger actually at least is active. Is that what you kind of mean?
Yeah. So depression is one of the phases as well. And again, it's an important phase to sit in for a certain amount of time. And it could be an introspective phase as well, but you don't want to stay in any of the stages. But yes, anger can pull you out of the depression stage. And then from there, you know, and then there's the bargaining and then the testing and then the acceptance. So you want to move in that direction. And by the way, when you get to acceptance, you might go back to bargaining and then, but the thing is to have an upward trajectory where you could just kind of put the relationship, in this case, grieving the relationship for what it was and not having such like a black and white, like this person is the devil and that's it. You know, obviously you were in it for X amount of years. What was it like?
It was 9 years.
9. Yeah. So obviously you were getting something out of it, but you know, she's not there right now.
Well, I mean, how important is it? And are we aware of these phases that we go through in life? Or is that why it's essential to have, you know, a therapist or something like that to help you work through these stages? Are we aware when we go through these stages?
Some people are and some people aren't. Some people have a lot more awareness just because they're interested in working on themselves, or they've had a life experience that has just, you know, people talk about their rock bottom moments where it's kind of like, okay, I really need to look at something, or I really don't want to repeat this pattern anymore. And it seems like I am the common denominator here. So why don't I do something different? So people like that tend to have more self-awareness and a desire to evolve and change. But some people don't. Some people, and that's what's frustrating when you leave a relationship or you feel like you've been victimized in some way. And that person, let's say like with a narcissist or even a borderline, they'll find their people. Like there are a lot of people that like to enable, that like codependent, like being codependent to a narcissist.
I mean, we see it even with like Sandoval and Schwartz, is that it's like, you know, a lot of people really dislike them, but at the same time, a lot of them are still open arms. Like, I want to be in a relationship with these people still.
Isn't it wild? Especially because like the world knows what Sandoval did. And then these girls are just like, oh yeah, let's go on a date. It's incredible.
Yes, it's wild. No, it's just really, it's weird to watch, and it's weird to kind of take in everything into account where it's like, you know, we even started this conversation talking about Ariana and these stages and her working through things. But just like the show, I almost feel like we sometimes kind of move past like these men actually working on themselves at all. You know, it's like, you know, Ariana, like she's going through these stages, she's doing this and that. And we kind of almost leave Sandoval out of the equation because I don't know if we feel like it's a lost cause or if he's a guy and we're all dumb. Like sometimes I feel like we ignore, like we just let them continue on this path of destruction for themselves and others, but then we almost put the onus on the female doing the hard work.
Well, yeah, or the quote unquote victim. And I really do think that every dynamic is co-created. So even if you are the quote unquote victim or, you know, like you have more of a codependent personality or you're an empath. Okay. Yes, you can pull in narcissist more if you have a codependency issue or you're an empath, but that doesn't mean you're a complete victim. And I think with Sandoval, I mean, you see it all through the season. He's just like, are we over it yet? The people that
he's angry. You can feel the anger coming off of him. Yeah.
He's just like, everyone get over it. It's been all of 5 months at this point. After having a decade-long relationship, and there was betrayal, and the sense of betrayal runs deep, you know, when that's happened to you over an extended period of time. I mean, especially 10 years when you're between 30 and 40, a lot go on. So those are really formative years in a way. And so, but Sandoval is just wanting everyone to get over it. And the narcissistic defense structure is like that. It's kind of like there is not a lot of empathy. They can't handle any type of real ownership. And when that happens, they feel the blame. And it's like there's a term called narcissistic annihilation, where if the shame is too much, to take responsibility is like this amount of shame that feels like they might die. So it's kind of like they go into blame shifting, like, well, this happened and this happened, or they do something that's called triangulating, which is they'll bring in another person or circumstance to like, look over there, like, see, it's because of that, or just to even, well, like you see Sandra, well, he did that, she does this, but we're not talking about that. Like when I deal with this with couples or people, and they try to blame shift or triangulate, I'm like, hold up, that issue, we'll table that. We'll talk about that in a second. Right now, we're talking about this. So,
but how would somebody like Tom Sandoval even begin to break a pattern that is so ingrained that he might not even be aware that he's doing it? Like how, I mean, what is, because you say, oh, you know, I think we all think of ourselves, and no, I don't know. I don't think we think of ourselves as evil or villains. We might have like bad streaks, but we don't think of ourselves as potentially fully evil. I might be completely wrong in that, but like, is there, I mean, what Sandoval should have done? What should he have done this season besides just not film this show? Like, how does he, is there a point where he accepts that I might be this certain way in relationships and that's dangerous to other people?
Yes. So that would be the very adaptive thing to do, because the narcissistic defense structure at the end of the day, it's antisocial and it's not completely adaptive. And I always call it like, because it is something that can be fixed if you wanted to, if you have the motivation to. And I do meet a lot of people that are like, you know, I've been told enough that I have narcissistic tendencies and I do want to do something about it. Like that does happen. That does exist. But it's up to the person. The thing is, I always call narcissists, like the narcissist defense structure, lazy. It's kind of lazy because you can find people that will enable your behavior. So it's like, bye. Oh, you got caught, or I got caught doing this. Fine. And then that's why, you know, Lala says it in one of the episodes. She's like, I just feel so like discarded. Like I'm just like this trash that you just took out when you didn't need me anymore. And you really do feel like that when a narcissist violates your trust, or there's a breakup that happens. It's like, oh, you're not it's called supply, narcissistic supply. So I can't get the praise or adoration or whatever. You're not a punching bag anymore. You're going to stand up for yourself, or you're breaking up with me. Bye. I have like 5 other backups. I have more supply. So that's what happens with these type. And that's what Sandoval was doing with Rachel. Raquel.
Yeah, Rachel Levis. Yeah, Raquel, the artist formerly known as Raquel. Yeah.
And then you saw how Rachel just went to rehab, whatever she was doing, and then broke up with him, didn't want anything to do with him, I think blocked him. And then
cut ties.
And then he was kind of had this like shock denial, like you're breaking up with all of this, right? You know, type of thing. And then just moved on. It wasn't real. It was just supplying something for him. And it's like, okay, well, I'll get it somewhere else now. It's kind of
what are the odds that he's actually able to, because you explained this so brilliantly, but what are the odds that he actually is thinking in terms of, oh, that's my supply, or that's this? Like, how aware potentially could people with narcissistic tendencies be aware of their own behavior if they're constantly making excuses and pointing fingers in other directions? Is there a chance that he truly does not think he's a narcissist at all?
Well, okay, the potential is there. Again, this isn't like a brain disease where, you know, you're impaired and like the left side. It's nothing like that. Right? You know what I mean? Yeah. So he has the ability, but the willingness is so low with narcissistic people. It is so low, especially because they're getting these highs off of, some of them get highs off of hurting other people. Now, Tom seems to me like he's more, there's overt narcissist and covert narcissist. That's one thing. And so covert narcissists, they come off like a lot of people like them. They have superficial relationships. They do what he did for Sheena, like so generous. Like Sheena has this like guilt. And then so
that taps into what Sheena loves, is that Sheena does love to be told that she's amazing. And she does seem to really want and need love. So that feeds into what she deals with.
Exactly. And so that's what covert narcissists do. There's something, these overly generous, like grandiose, over the top things. And you're like, oh my God, I feel so special. Or in Sheena's case, it's like she really needed that money at the time. And so that made her, you know, feel good and safe and all of those things. But the covert narcissist is kind of like, they never consciously say it or like overtly say it, but it's like the subconscious or even unconscious, like, now you're indebted to me. So any transgression that I might have in the future, like, you know, banging my girlfriend's best friend type of thing, you get to overlook because of how generous, look at all these nice things I did for you.
Well, that's why it's shocking in the finale, even Sheena saying like, this is the Tom I remember doing amazing things, sending a sound guy to San Francisco. And, you know, she really, and you almost can't fault her in a way, because it really does seem like that touches this kind of like pleasure button for her of like, that makes her feel really special. But the audience can see like, whoa, that's not, you know, that's not actually tackling, you know, this person's behavior and what they have continued to do over the course of this show. You brought up Rachel, and she's been so fascinating, even not being on the show, because she's one of the only people that did, you know, she put herself in a mental health facility for months and said, listen, I need more time. I need more time. And then she went and started a podcast where she talks about all of this stuff, which I thought, you know, express yourself, but you're still so early in your quote unquote recovery that you know, you're hearing a lot of therapy speak, but you can also sense this person, you know, you can sense this reality star wanting to come out and be petty and be mean because she went through something so intense. But I feel like it's wild. Once again, we're talking about like Ariana and Rachel, the two people that are like, I guess, victims in a sense. Rachel really put herself away. And I'm not saying like, oh, this is a hero, but does she have a better chance of overall happiness because she did remove herself from this situation?
I think so. I mean, you never know, right? So what you do want to do is remove yourself from any type of toxicity, right? So anything that's not serving you on, I talk to this about my clients all the time. It's like, what are you consuming? What media are you consuming? What people are you around? The energy. I'm
fucked, Lauren. I'm fucked. I've consumed all of this. I'm so screwed.
Like, enjoy.
No, it doesn't, Lauren. I am in such a dark place because of these shows. It's so sad. I was so bummed out after the finale.
Oh my God. Well, you know, I can help you with that. You're in a safe place.
I'm hopeless. You can't fix me at this point. I've watched too much of these shows.
Well, okay. So with Rachel, at least, and like the whole thing, I think about this when I'm watching the show. It's like that whole culture of just even how the show got started. They are, you know, working in the industry, in the restaurant industry, and then the hours, and there's a lot of drinking, and there's a lot of, you know, like just like fucking each other, and there's just so much going on, and it's like it's not conducive to a healthy environment. I mean, just even biologically, like for your sleep, because you're like staying up late and drinking and partying and all this stuff, and then all the drama that's associated with it, and then getting filmed, and then you're getting rewarded, you know, so you're getting this elevated dopamine response via the reality show from being extra dramatic. So is any of it healthy? Probably not. And so removing yourself from that, yeah, that's one step. But you know, there's a lot of work to do with that. Even if, you know, you are a quote unquote victim, I don't really believe in the whole like victim. Again, everything is co-created.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm a big proponent of taking responsibility for what you did and not having shame about it, because shame keeps you stuck. It keeps you attracting the same thing and really malignant patterns. So it's kind of like, look at what happened and recover from it, heal from it. You know, Carl Jung, who's like a famous psychologist from back in the day, he's the one that talked about like our shadow. We all have a shadow
self. Yeah.
Shadow self. And that's the thing that we discuss. We despise in others. The character defects that we despise in others are the ones that maybe we know about ourselves but would never admit, you know, kind of like the, you know, pastor that's secretly gay, or, you know, like that type of thing, that really intense shadow. So if we could bring those into the light, they kind of dissipate. You could release the shame from those things and move on and become a more evolved person. But do a lot of people do that? No, they go on and find other enablers and numb out. And so it's about doing the shadow work and having the willingness to look at yourself, which takes a lot of courage sometimes. I'm not saying it's comfortable.
No, I like that you said Carl Jung, and I was like, oh, was he on an early season of Vanderpump Rules? Is that Carl Jung? Yeah. No. It is one of those things that you talk about this work, and obviously, you know, doing work on yourself doesn't feel sexy. It's hard, you know, it's like uncomfortable, like you said. And I've thought so much about this year, how short life is, you know, even though it feels long sometimes, how quick it is and how easy it is. All of a sudden, you're just going to be in your 50s and your 60s and your 70s. And how hard it is to drill down on work on yourself, because it's always easier to not. It's always easier to not. Well, I
Is
mean,
it though?
well, I think we convince ourselves. I think we
Yeah.
convince ourselves it's easier to lay there, eat potato chips, and to, make fun of the shows that we watch. But I think really the happiness I've found in my life is when I've worked hard at something. It's just hard to stay on that track, and that's why it's
Mhm.
interesting to study somebody like Tom Sandoval. I'm endlessly fascinated by him because we always talk about the redemption arc of this season, that they were trying to give Tom Sandoval this redemption arc 3 to 5 months after the initial thing happened.
Mhm.
And I feel like Tom's been his worst enemy because every time they try to set him up for success, he'll, the true self will come out. The anger will come out. And, it's easy to sit there and be like a Monday morning quarterback while you're watching this show because you see it so blatantly. You can't
Yeah.
see stuff in your own life, but you see it with him. And how does he get away ever from the anger of saying, you put yourself in this cage? You did this to yourself. Is he afraid to face his shame potentially? I mean, is he afraid to like that because he'll feel the shame?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the narcissist annihilation, they have a very low tolerance for shame. Think of it like, let's say I have a wound on my shoulder and it's like this big. And so, but if anyone comes within a foot of it, it's like, I could feel it. It's like, I didn't even touch it. That's what it's like with, but again, they do have control over, if they want to heal that wound and if they want to expand their capacity for taking responsibility for malignant behavior, for behavior that's damaging, that's completely within their control, because they're willing to take responsibility for any type of adoration or praise, as you can see when he's performing and doing all that stuff. So there is that ability. And I also, I wanted it to connect it with what you're saying about like, is it hard? And because that's one of the questions I'm like, when I talk to my clients, I'm like, would you rather be doing this same shit in 10 or 15 or 20 years? Or would you rather be a little uncomfortable right now, create some new neural pathways, just like you were saying, getting out of your comfort zone, but it leads to a better result? So you can just do a little bit. That's like going to the gym. It's like you're going to look that much better, but it's a little uncomfortable right now. I think the trade-off is really worth it. But
you have to want it. You have to want it.
The willingness has to be there, and the tolerance for feeling a little uncomfortable at times has to be there. Any type of growth, that is the case. But I do always make the argument that you will be more uncomfortable if you're still stuck in your patterns. And it really is, I have people that come to me in their 50s and 60s that are like, okay, I can't anymore. And sometimes it's because a relationship ends. Sometimes it's because their kids don't want to talk to them. Like some big breakdown has to happen. They lose their job, something like horrible happens to their reputation. Again, a real rock bottom moment where it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe I can look at myself now because I'm running out of enablers and I don't feel great about, life could be more enjoyable. So,
and I would imagine when you are getting all of this feedback on a reality show and it's negative, but at the same time, you're getting a nice paycheck, you're getting all of these things. It's this weird seesaw that almost might make you stay in a certain type of behavior instead of actually fixing it. And if you go over even to the Valley, I mean, Jax Taylor, a legend in reality TV, we see him growing up and what he's like in a marriage with a child, but he's still essentially the same person that we left him in Vanderpump Rules as. Just because you're married and have a kid does not mean that is quote unquote growth.
Well, and that's so funny because he vacillates between both of those things. Like, I'm so grown up, I have a kid now, and then all the other cast members make fun of him because he haven't grown up at all. And then he even will say, like, I'm a third grader. He'll go back and forth between those things. And the thing is, like, the brain is a predictive machine. It thrives kind of like, at least the limbic system, like the occipital part of our brain, it on pattern and on routine and everything. And that's good sometimes, and it's not great sometimes, because again, you want to be able to grow. So you need that to survive. But in order to evolve and thrive, you need to get out of those states. So is it cute that he's 40 still doing the same stuff? And like, no, it's not. It's kind of
you're
like,
getting rewarded. You're getting rewarded for staying in that behavior. Right. Like, so it's like, it's got to be such a mind F in a sense, because I even watch these shows and go, oh, that's pretty enjoyable. He's being a jackass. It's pretty fun to watch. And then you're like, no, you want him to get better. And then it's almost sad because you're like, yeah, man, you can move to the Valley. You can move to Timbuktu. You're going to still have to face yourself in the mirror. You're going to be the same person.
Yes. Yeah. Changing your geography does not make you help you evolve at all. I mean, and some people really think that. There's a term for it in psychology, but like the slang term is pulling a geographic. Like, I'm going to move here and then I'm going to be this responsible, whatever, woke, enlightened. No, that doesn't happen. You go wherever, to anywhere you take yourself. So you bring all your problems and everything with you. So that's what we're seeing with Jax and Brittany.
Is there anybody on Vanderpump Rules that you would point towards and go, this is a really solid relationship. They're working. They're doing positive things. Is there anybody that we can point to on this show?
On Vanderpump Rules.
On Vanderpump, not the Valley.
Yeah, because on the Valley, I like some of those relationships.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like Sheena and Brock are trying. I think Brock is trying a lot more than Sheena is. I think Sheena's a little bit stuck in her ways and what could be called like her victimhood, or which there's a lot to say about that. But I think Brock is trying. But besides that, no. I mean, okay, Lisa
well,
and her husband.
Lisa and her husband. Well, I mean, we don't even get to see how they interact this season. But DJ James Kennedy and Allie, people will say, wow, okay, DJ James Kennedy is so much more calm than he's ever been. He seems like he really, but we've seen DJ James Kennedy overly exude love towards his partners in scenes throughout the show. I want to believe that they're amazing. I want to believe, and somebody got upset at me because I was really questioning, can people change? And I was like, I want to believe people can change, because there's a lot of bad things that these people have done in the past. There's a lot of bad things we've done in the past. So I want to believe that. And somebody was like, how dare you, people can't change. And I want to believe that they can. What is the likelihood that DJ James Kennedy truly is growing up and appreciate? Because he seems like he nails Tom Sandoval's behavior and recognizes the, how ridiculous he can be sometimes.
Absolutely. And I mean, I do believe, just based on what I do for a living, I do believe people can change. I'm super passionate about it. But again, the willingness has to be there. It's one of the first things I ask people, or assess for, is someone's level of willingness. So if it's not there, I'm not going to waste your time or mine. But in terms of James, I do see him trying. I mean, he stopped drinking again, but he stopped drinking for himself. And any kind of compulsive behavior, you need to, because obviously a lot of people go through that are like that.
Yeah.
Go through interventions, or there's like a partner is threatening. That never works. But it seems like he's doing it for himself. And it seems like his nervous system is more regulated when he doesn't drink. Like when he would drink, it would make me anxious, So he seems more regulated. And then it seems like Allie is working on being closer. I mean, she basically says she's like, this is cool for now. That's what I said last season. Remember, I was just like, well, this could be good for her little whatever, card, situation. I did feel like it was not transactional, but I felt like she was getting other things out of besides a relationship with James. And so she kind of says it more or less. She's like, well, I never really thought about we're living together and stuff, and that's cool, but I never really, and then James is expressing this more willingness.
I want to have a family. I want to be married. I want all of these things, which is interesting too, of somebody wanting everything, the pie in the sky, instead of going step by step. And I do got to hand it to Allie that I'm so glad that she's open and honest in the moment, saying oh, I never pictured myself as a mom, or you know what, I never wanted to get married, but I do love you. So if there was somebody, it would be you. I remember the transactional conversation, but I will say, compared to her castmates, she really keeps that very you can't read it. It's not obvious to me. I don't think she's out there thirsting, it's much lower. I just can't, it's not as obvious with Allie, if that is the case, transactional.
Oh yeah. I mean, she's not like Ratchet or anything, her personality structure isn't, dramatic or, what's the word I'm thinking of?
There's no histrionics with her or anything like that.
That's the word I was thinking of. She's not hysterical or anything like that. So, you know, but I think she fits in well with the show, with everyone else being kind of like more histrionic and dysregulated. So
it'll be interesting to see in future seasons when shit goes down, how she behaves and handles it. Because right now, you know, even earlier in the season, we found out that she had left for a weekend because she wasn't liking his behavior. But that was like revealed in an episode. Like we didn't see that happen. We didn't like, and that didn't get leaked to the press. And I thought, interesting, like the relationship is really kept undercover, like hidden almost in certain ways in terms of the issues that they might be dealing with, which I kind of was like, congratulations for keeping that off the air. But it'll be interesting because I feel like these shows, you know, it comes for everybody at some point. Everybody goes through something, and we will have to see how she handles those things.
And, you know, and that's totally fine. I think that's kind of a normal part of being in a relationship, is having that repair phase. And it's honestly not about, you know, you have to have like the connection and the chemistry and there are certain like foundational things that need to be there, the trust and the safety. But part of that safety piece is being able to have conflict resolution. So it's not about, oh, we never fight. I hate when, you know, I might get a couple for couples therapy and like, we never fight. Okay, you guys are creepy and there's so much to deal with. There's so much to deal with. I don't know if I want to do this with you. But if you can repair, you know, after conflict, like conflict resolution, it deepens the intimacy. So, okay, she went away. He had time to think. Sometimes we need like a break from, you know, to reassess things. And it looks like they came back together and were a bit stronger after that.
What was your take on Schwartz and Joe, or Joseph, this season?
Yeah.
Joe looks like, you know, head over heels for Schwartz. Schwartz weirdly strings her along, but at the same time tries to remind her that they're just friends, even though we found out they were sleeping together. Even, you know, it wasn't just the past, it was during filming as well. And, you know, I feel in a lot of ways, Schwartz, and we've said this last time, you know, gets by on being so cute and fun and lovable. And he's so charming, and you don't feel evilness at all from him. But at the same time, watching that finale, I feel like he threw her into the lion's den time and time again of like, you go talk to Katie, my ex, do it, you know? And it's almost like you can't even trace it. It feels so innocent. But when you think about it, you're like, why would he ever put her in this situation?
Yeah. So Schwartz has what's called some avoidant tendencies. And, you know, there's a whole personality profile that's avoidant personality disorder and all this. So I see a lot of avoidant stuff. He's definitely like conflict avoidant. And so Schwartz, and then there's this other element to him where he does attract like a lot of more masculine women. And I mean, like energetically masculine. So like that other woman that went on a date with Katie as well. That woman,
Tori
walks up to him and is like, are you going to ask me on a date? That is very masculine. And also with Joe making herself so available, that's not a very feminine. So, and also I'm not just making this up. There's a lot of research on this. There's a woman named Dr. Pat Allen who does a lot on masculine, feminine polarity, and has nothing to do with like the gender you're assigned with or identify with or anything. It's like in every relationship, there's a more masculine element and a more feminine element. That's all I'm talking about, but anyway, in this case, back to Schwartz.
It would be great if you were making all of this up. You're like, you know what? I am actually making all of this. I didn't for a second think you were making this up, but I love that you were like, this is actual. No, this is.
People get like upset. They're like, well, you know, I'm an independent one. And I was like, yes, you can be that way. But if you want like a masculine man, like they just go, you can't like, anyway, in this case, Schwartz is he's more like feminine energy, which is fine. That's great. So you're going to attract a more masculine type of woman, which is like Katie and Joe and Tori. They're like, you know, masculine. And so, but Joe, I could see her having this like conflict going back and forth of wanting, it's like she's wanting to pull out this more like masculine energy out of Tom, like court me, let's be boyfriend, girlfriend, like wanting and like chasing and like, or it was so painful at that singles dating thing where she walks up and is like basically nagging him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, touching his hair and messing with his hat. Yeah.
And then she catches him. Well, it's like she catches him cheating or something, but not really, when he's flirting with that other woman at the singles event and she storms out. And so it's kind of, I almost want to say I feel sorry. It's just very cringy, you know? And then I do think that Jo, there's an opportunity for growth around her maybe like ability to like express herself. And then she finally does. Like, I think I like you more than you like me. But you could tell it's really hard, and all of her like, like her little like, you know, it's like kind of like an immature type of where, or sometimes people just don't feel safe completely expressing themselves because they're fearing rejection. So
and is that potentially where tics come in?
Yeah. Just like, or I don't know, or making a joke or things like that can all.
Well, both of them, they just sit there and make sounds together. Like they do the baby voice, they do that, you know, like Schwartz will be like, Jo, ayo, you know, it's very interesting. And people are like, oh my God, they do belong together. And I don't see it that way. I just see it as like two people that potentially bring out really bad things in each other.
No, and I don't think, I mean, Schwartz has said it. He's like, I don't want anything serious. And so to string Katie along like that is not nice. And that's the thing that avoidant people do. They're like smiley, like, I'm so smiley. But they're like avoiding. I remember I dated someone that I'm like, stop smiling. There's nothing this like, you know, it's kind of like that you're basically like creating this intimacy barrier and then smiling the whole time. And it's very confusing. And especially if you're wanting to come close to someone. So if that's happening, you could feel the distance. And if you feel yourself kind of wanting to be closer, and you're just probably dealing with an avoidant personality type, or at least avoidant attachment style. There's 4 attachment styles: avoidant, which is Tom, or like, and it's like this. You see it with Jesse and Michelle too. Like Jesse has some avoidant stuff where it's kind of like, okay, I need this much.
Yeah, you're talking about the Lallies over on the Valley. So Jesse will say, I need this much.
Well, he's not necessarily saying it, but then like Michelle goes over here, maybe it's like texting someone. He's like, oh, wait, come here. I don't want to break up with you. And like, give me a hug, blah, blah, blah. And then a little bit of devaluing and nitpicking. And then Michelle goes, and it's like, wait, so it's like, they just need this like buffer. Like, you know, when you put magnets that are opposites, and like, they just need like a little bit, because otherwise they feel suffocated. So that's the avoidant type. And they usually attract anxious types, and anxious types are always like worried, like they have no it's called object permanence. So it's like if something leaves the room, it's like you're cheating on me, what's going on? Hi, I need to talk to you every minute of the day. And this whole thing, this preoccupation with, and not like you're dating someone that is, you know, cheating, or you're worried, just like an unfounded kind of like, they might leave me at any moment. And then disorganized attachment is having both. It's like, get away from me, come close, get away from me, come close, which I think a lot of these people have. And then you have like a healthy, secure attachment, which is like basically like Danny and Nia.
Yeah, Danny and Nia. You know, it's interesting talking over in the Valley, Danny and Nia, like to me, I mean, they're obviously going through some very intense things, but they're doing it where they're very openly communicating with each other. You know, that she's actually, and what's so fascinating about her is that she, you know, she's like, I've always been this happy person, and this thing, you know, and then postpartum, she's feeling things that she's never felt before, to the point where it seems like it scares her. And she tells her partner about this, and he says, whatever you need. We love you. We support you. We're not going anywhere. Talk to whoever you, and it was such a revelation, because we don't see that on reality television. We don't see people communicating openly and honestly, and we believe them.
No, and you don't see it in real life, let me tell you. And I talk about this a lot because of all the scandal and everything, is that when in a relationship, a man cheats the most often, statistically, when a new baby is born. So, because there's so many dynamics that change, right? And the tension it's not like, and as we see with other people like Jax, and like a lot of these other guys are like, our sex life went away when the kids came. Like, there's a grieving process right there. So when a new baby comes into the picture, or when a close family member dies, especially when a child dies, is when men cheat the most, because of this like sense of loss, and like a desire to feel alive again, or the awareness of like mortality. But both of those,
is it to feel closeness with somebody without that person knowing them completely?
That, and like that rush, that feeling of it is part of that. And there's a thing called emophilia, which is like that like intense that desire to feel wanted that you feel in the beginning of a relationship, especially with,
I think that was Sandoval and Rachel. I think that's what was happening with Sandoval, like initially.
Yeah.
On Vanderpump. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if it's like someone you don't know that well. But yeah, like that intense thing is like what you're what you're seeking in in those situations. So the fact that Danny, and I mean, I'm just not getting any of those like vibes from, Danny, and he's just like, yes, it's like such a securely attached relationship. It's like, so it's kind of sexy. I'm like, oh my God.
The weirdest part of it is that the only weird thing I can get on Daniel is that he's friends with Jax. I'm like, how does that work? But like, you're like, okay, but otherwise it's really refreshing to see a couple. Then if you compare it to the Lallies though, like what you were talking about, but also it's interesting that the man, Jesse, feels that I've made a commitment and I will be completely miserable and you'll be miserable, but I am not going anywhere. And I'm like, you don't get points for just staying, just for honoring a commitment. If, every scene, she looks completely miserable. In fact, she even tells him, I think in next week's episode, I kind of want you to be completely different. Just as your personality in this way.
Well, because I've had couples say almost the exact same thing. What she said is, I want you to go on this spiritual retreat, kind of like Kourtney Kardashian style. I want you to go on this spiritual retreat and like have a new personality. I'm like, oh my God. First of all, okay, that's a really inarticulate way. What I think she's trying to say is, I'd like you to go on this retreat and work on some of the character defects that you have that have triggered me or hurt me. And so we can move through them. I think that's what she's trying to say, not come back with a different personality, or however she said that was kind of like cringy. But yeah, I think that she's at the point of, again, Jesse has some narcissistic profiling like structures. And so like you get to a point with people like that, especially if you're married, and it's kind of like it's called resignation. It's kind of like, all right, I'm numbed out. I'm over here texting someone else. There's like, that's when the cheating can start to happen. And it's like, okay, sure, fine, you're right. I'm just going to roll my eyes a lot right now until I figure out how I want to get out of this, basically.
Because usually it happens with females too. It's not just males. Females do that as well. If they're not feeling loved and taken, paid attention to. The other thing I find interesting about Jesse wanting to go off and do this ayahuasca journey, it makes me laugh so much because you got Sandoval doing breath work. You got Jesse doing ayahuasca. You got Jax in the past doing Reiki. And I'm like, what about just normal therapy? Why don't we just normal therapy where we act? Like, it's always got to be some big, bold gesture of like, I'm going to go trip my balls off and hopefully that'll fix every problem. And it's just so silly because you're like, you don't want to do the hard work. You want to go and have some kind of like insane, cool experience to tell your buddies about.
And it does not happen that way. I've done ayahuasca and it can bring an awareness to certain things. I think like those psychedelics can do that. And I would only recommend psychedelics, like just things that are more natural. I'm not a fan of like the designer drugs or anything like that. But that doesn't mean people come out of these experiences and they're like, I'm woke, I'm cured. And there's what's called the integration process. Like I'm an integrative health practitioner because I help people integrate all of these different parts of themselves. Like that's what basically like psychology and healing it's all about, or like what we're talking about with Jung is like you're integrating the shadow, you're bringing it into the light, you're integrating this kind of dismembered part of yourself so you become a whole person, and just like whole, like spiritually, energetically, within your body. And a lot of people that have certain diseases, it comes from like, repressing something, a trauma, a personality defect, you have shame around anything. So it's like, but when we integrate all of these things, then the healing could happen. So the ayahuasca part is just the awareness. And then you have to do some discovery after the awareness. And then there's the integration. So that stuff drives me nuts. Like, thank you for coming to my TED Talk about that. But it's like, I do not like it when people like do these things and they're like, when I did ayahuasca, it's like, I'm healed now. I'm like, no, you're not. And I even talked to the organizer. I'm like, hey, if you want help, helping people integrate these things that they, when they were on their journey.
They learn on these journeys. Yeah.
But yeah, so if you have done ayahuasca or you're going to do an ayahuasca journey, find someone to do like 3 months of integration work with afterwards, at least. So yeah, you're not going to come back cured.
No, yeah, no, that's why I find it so interesting that like is like, he's like, like, I'm going to go do this to save our marriage. And I'm like, that's, there's so much more to save your marriage than just these bold kind of go trip in the desert things. Back to Vanderpump Rules. Mm-hmm. We talked briefly, just mentioned her name briefly, of Lala, the Lala of it all this season, because we really, throughout the season, there's been so many interesting changes, and it's hard to understand what is really coming from her and what is actually coming from production and her trying to move story along in some weird way. Mm. But how it read to me, and especially in the last monologue of the finale, is in ways it came off like, bitterness, anger, jealousy, not at Sandoval, but really directed at Ariana. Mm. And how I see it, and I think you might maybe see it differently, is Ariana removed herself from a situation. She was very open and honest with everybody from the beginning, even from the reunion last year, that I am not going to be in a scene with this person. It didn't mean she wasn't there. Like, she was there. She just wasn't going to have a talking scene. And in the after show, she said, listen, I've seen Tom Sandoval cry. We've seen it time and time again on this show. That's what we're going to get out of that scene. But like, isn't it also a good scene to watch somebody stand up for themselves and walk away and say, you have hurt me. You do not have access to this. In fact, 2 episodes ago, she brought up like the gray rock pattern of pushing people out in a sense. But anyways, sorry, but Lala, what is your take on Lala this season?
Okay, well, a bunch of things. Firstly, for Lala and her own life, I really like her journey and what she's doing. So she has also experienced narcissistic abuse, but I love how she's saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be miserable. It's like, you get to the point where it's not about the other person. It's like, I want to be better for me, because there's a phase of like revenge, whatever, and revenge success, revenge, or I'm just going to be angry at you. But now she's just like, I want to have another baby. I don't want to be angry. And I do think that she's projecting a little bit of that onto Ariana. Like, Ariana is in her own phase of grief. And yeah, I guess she had some deals coming in, with commercials and Dancing with the Stars. Ariana did, but that doesn't mean.
But that doesn't take away from the pain or the suffering. I
don't know how those things got equivocated. Where it's kind of like that's her professional life, and then Ariana's grieving process is different, and it's probably also being slowed down because she's kind of numbing out with this new relationship with Dan. That's my opinion. But like, Lala seems to be, I think, a little bit critical of it, too critical of it. And
very critical. I mean, like, so much so that it makes her own work, like, I can't tell what's the truth and what's not, because I, like you, every time she talks about a family and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, right on. Like, oh my God, what a great, really makes so much sense. But then when she talks about Ariana, I feel like it just comes off bitter and hateful.
Yeah. And then a little bit later, she's like, oh, but Ariana has so much healing ahead of her. That's true. So stop, like, lay off of her if you know that.
Part of the healing is going to be dealing with Lala and the shit she says.
Yeah, and Lala comes off kind of, I mean, she's a little harsh, so it's both of those things. And I think that Lala sees a lot of herself in Ariana. I think that's why she gets maybe triggered by some of those things, because again, they did have a similar experiences in healing. And then she's also getting mad at Ariana because Ariana is like kind of creating this rule about, if you're my friend, you can't talk to Tom and da-da-da. And I disagree with that. I think that's displaced anger. I think that's a lot of projection. I mean, honestly, that's a form of tyranny, which is frowned upon to, be that way. So we can't be like emotional or psychological tyrants, but to say like, you can't be, no, like, let everyone have their journey around that. But it didn't make sense. So with that,
well, to me, there was a lot of gray area there, because I feel like she said he has no access to me, but she never actually went through with ignoring it. Like, she talks to Schwartz through, halfway through the season, they're actually working. In fact, in the last episode, she tells Sheena, listen, we're both warriors. You're never going to get rid of me. I love you. Says all of these things in support of like, don't worry about it. We're always going to be good. So, tyranny is one way, but she doesn't follow through on it. So to me, it just seems like that was initially out of anger. And then as you go on, it's like, it's okay.
It was. And by the way, like, it's so, I mean, just silly to say you don't have access. You guys are in the same house. You are on the same
well, and
reality
that's
show.
the
You
point
know that,
Lala
right?
makes. Yeah, that's the point Lala makes. But I think overall, or what I read into it is that, yeah, I'm just not going to do a scene. We're not going to do a forgiveness scene so he can like make good with the audience. And he's going
Yeah.
to use my shine to make him look better.
Yeah, and I do know that that's what Sandoval wants. I mean, I really do think that he just wants it to be over with and swept under the rug. Narcissists are very good at minimizing it's just a defense mechanism. Like, let's shrink this down and minimize it. They'll often say, with things that are a lot less, big, they'll be like, I was just kidding. I was just joking. Oh my God, you're so sensitive. You can't take a joke, all this stuff. Now with this, there was just a lot of like blame shifting and everything. And now it's like, fine, I made a mistake. Can we move on? Type of thing.
Yeah.
And Ariana's not, and I understand that. There's no need to be like, oh yes, Tom, you are forgiven, and we had this great relationship. That's not probably ever going to happen. I don't think it needs to. I think Ariana, for her own sake, should do forgiveness work for herself, because there's no way you're dating someone for almost a decade and didn't see any of the red flags like from day one, and then forgive the situation. But there's so much
when you love somebody, though, you do make excuses for their behavior. Like day one, like obviously, if you're like, I believe the best in someone, or I've given this person my heart, I would imagine you do genuinely believe the best regardless of, and keep chalking it up to people make mistakes.
Well, like, okay, so I think in a healthy relationship, that's not the case. Kind of like how Jason was telling Luke. It's like, okay, I'm not sure about this whole Bonnie and Clyde thing. Like, if someone's making a mistake, and I do think that's
Dodie, yeah.
Right? That's a form of like real intimacy and safety, when it's kind of like, I love you, we're a team, you're my partner, and that wasn't cool. And that made me uncomfortable. And we're being, you're kind of like a social pariah right now because of X, Y, and Z. That's really loving someone, I think, not enabling their behavior like how Brittany does with Jax.
Yeah, a couple episodes ago, Jason actually, I felt like, or not Jason, Luke stood up firmly with Dodie and said, "You're always saying I'm sorry, but you're not listening." Like,
so good.
I was shocked. I really didn't think he had it in him. I was like, wow. And you could tell Dodie was like, what do you mean if? Like, it felt like she was almost combusting at a certain point, because he was firm, and he was, and you could still sense that it came from complete love, but he was being firm. And I was like, wow, it's another shocking thing to see, of like, no, this is the right way to handle things. But how often do we get, and maybe this is, with Lala as well, we get so caught up in bad behavior or things that we know, because, the whole thing on the Valley is like, gossiping, like passing around these things, and who told who this, and who told, like, oh my God, it's getting passed around. And it's the same behavior we've seen Dodie exhibit, 10 years ago on Vanderpump Rules. I mean, and Lala even talks, you said, about like, oh, I'm trying to get past this. I'm moving forward, and I'm not this person anymore. But how hard is it's just like to break those chains of what you are so used to. Is that like kind of endorphin kicks too, when like Dodie potentially passes around a rumor? Is that some kind of endorphin kick for her? Is that why she keeps doing it?
Oh yeah. So with her personality structure, which might Kristen Dodie, which might be on the more like borderline defense structure, they like love drama, and like drama by itself is a real addiction, just like gambling or like sex and love addiction and other things. Are like, addiction isn't just like drinking and drugs. So drama addiction, like, you really get those dopamine hits. And also it's a form of triangulating, which she does a lot. Like Kristen does a lot of that. Like she's getting blamed for something, points the finger over there. Like at the dinner, that's when she decided to blow up Michelle's spot about the texting, because something was, she's just always being, causing drama. So she triangulates by, trying to move the attention away. But yeah, they do get, even when she was on Vanderpump Rules, she's always doing, and then she does this thing that borderline people do, where it's kind of like they get everyone really offended, and then she does a lot of splitting and like rewriting reality. And then I'm a victim.
Well, she's an empath. She says she's an empath. She diagnosed herself as an empath, which
that
is
was hilarious.
amazing.
That was hilarious. No, there is something called dark empathy, and dark empathy is what people with, you know, like malignant personality types do when they take people's like weaknesses or, you know, something like with what she did with Michelle, or they'll take some type of fact and kind of like hold it and be like, you know, just for like, hey, I got this thing on you. And then, or they'll take an insecurity or something that they know will really trigger the person, and they'll use it to, I don't know, cause destruction. It depends on the situation, but it's never for a good reason. So there's dark empathy, but it's not being an empath. That is not what's going on.
How much do our egos get in the way of us changing as well? Like Sandoval, it seems like he has this tremendous ego, because even in the finale, you know, he tries to, hey, Ariana, Ariana turns and runs away, and he immediately explodes as like, oh, fucking lazy asshole. Oh, so lazy. Da, da, da. Like it just explodes and like venomous almost to his friends about her, which doesn't seem like somebody that's looking to apologize to somebody. It seems like somebody that wanted a certain result and that didn't get it. Now they're throwing a tantrum. Is that ego?
Yes. Well, there's a couple of things. When a narcissist does that, because I'll have people that come to me and they're like, how do they just explode like that? And I call it like holding their pee. I mean, there's an actual term for it, but it's like the narcissist can only pee, like hold their pee for so long and like, oh, look how nice and everything. And then they're just like, ah! And then they lose it. And it's just like that one little thing that like sets them off, and it's a bad thing. But in terms of ego, so just to break it down, sometimes when we use ego, just like in our regular vernacular, people think of like being arrogant or, so we're not talking about that. But the ego is kind of, in terms of what we're talking about right now, is kind of like your kind of set personality structure, and there can be a lot of rigidity around that. So narcissists, it's like they operate here, they're not willing to see outside of here. Borderline people like that too, and like they're just like, this is it. So it's like, it's very, I'm not willing to change, this is it. I will find people that will enable me to do it, and boom. Now, do they have the ability like we're talking about earlier? Of course they do. The willingness, typically very low, so they won't do it. The willingness gets higher if there's something out of it for them. So that's how you can bring a narcissist into couples therapy. Kind of like how we see like Jesse and Michelle do. It's kind of like, oh shit, I have a lot to lose, so now I'm willing to kind of adjust a little bit. But typically, no, the ego of someone like Sandoval is very rigid and fixed, and there's not a big willingness to change. So unfortunately, no. But I think they'll pretend a lot, like that scene when he pulls Sheena aside on the rooftop and then it's like with the hat on, and it's like, oh, he's crying. It's just so dramatic.
I love you. Yeah, cringy. Like it's
so cringy.
Well, I was like, are they about to kiss? Because I was like, what is like? Even in the last episode, Lisa's like, do you love him? And she's like, yeah. Right? She's like, then you know the right answer. I'm like, what is going on? Like that was one of the moments that I was just like, wait, what am I watching here? It confused me so much. The other thing, though, you could also bring that into Jax Taylor and Brittany's relationship, because, you know, this hasn't been seen on the show yet, but they're separated. And if you listen to podcasts or them in interviews, is that he made her move to a different place, like down the road. He's like, I'm not leaving. He's like, I'm not paying 2 mortgages. He, you know, to me, how I read it is, here is someone that is not able to love Brittany the way that she wants to be loved. And he knows that. He's never going to admit it. He's never going to say it, but he is going to refuse to do the work. Like, I think she even said on her brother, like, well, I want him to go to therapy, but he doesn't want to do it. You know, it's like, I think that's the thing, is that he's like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, no, I love you. I love you. I'll be with you. Yeah. So good. But you know, is that a thing too, where somebody, you know, where a guy could actually go on this show and know that he is not in love with this person the way that that she loves him, and just refuses to work and let her do the dirty work and have to eventually leave instead of him doing it?
Again, I don't think Jax is more to blame than Brittany personally. Again, every dynamic is co-created. Here's what I see in terms of all that. No, Jax is, and you see it building up, because she'll try to talk about something. He's like, I can't, I'm getting overwhelmed. And so the tolerance.
I'm 3 businesses right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's part of life. This, being in your, especially like 30s to, that it's like, that's what's going on. You're building businesses. It is stressful, but it's not an excuse to just abandon. But people like this, like, have a very low tolerance for any type of like conflict. It's like, it needs to go my way or that's it. And there's typically a lot of compulsive behavior attached to it. So they're like alcoholics or just sex and love addicts. And you see that go on. And like, for instance, I dated someone and I would be like, oh, let's talk about this. And they just get up and leave, like, just so angry. Like, but the tolerance for that is so low. And you see that with Jax and Brittany when they're talking about, she's trying to get like baby number 2. And then he's like, I can't even right now. And it's too much. And you could just see him getting really dysregulated. Now, that type of personality, that's what they do. It's kind of like, I can't deal with this, go away. And that's why you feel so discarded. You're like, what, you're just gonna throw me out like this? Yeah, I can't deal with it, and there's,
well, he'll throw it back on her too and be like, well, you got to get your drinking under control. I mean, a mom doesn't do this. Come on, we need you. And you do see the drinking a little bit, so I'm not saying that's completely ridiculous, but it seems like an excuse in a sense of like, well, listen, you do this. You do this.
Shifting for sure. Yeah. There's a lot of blame shifting with the alcohol. Now, do I think Brittany? Yeah, I mean, I think that she's drinking a bit too much. Like that one, I was getting like a hangover from watching her when they went in Malibu. I'm like, oh my God, that looked terrible. But at the same time, what I see with Brittany is a little bit of what's called limerence. And limerence is when you like project all of these things like on this, like you kind of like put them on a pedestal. So she's like ignored a lot. And you can see her throughout the season, like, oh, that's just Jax. You know how he is.
Yeah.
But she's like, I have my eye on the prize. I want these babies. I want to live like this. I don't understand what money is. And we're just like, money grows on trees and I'm getting what I want. And like Jax is like, no. And she at the same time, she's not completely like innocent. She's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of uncomfortable when she's just like, I need Jax to make me feel sexy. No, you actually, and that's part of the female like energy dynamic, is like the female energy brings more of like the sensuality and the fun to a relationship. And so she's, like not doing any of that. Like no one can make you feel sexy except you, I think. And then, I mean, it is co-created. Like if your partner's like, you look like shit, that's one thing. But like, I do think that, she has to do her part. They go away to a hotel and she's like, she has glasses on and like, I mean, kind of like come try, Brittany, especially if you're, trying to babies. And then, but she's treating him like a sperm machine. Like, come on, we got to get our kid.
But I mean, she is communicating. She is saying, I want to feel sexy, but you're saying that the other person in that relationship, it's co-created and she needs to do some of the work herself. Is that what you're saying?
I do. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of criticism for that. But, in terms of like traditional male, female, like men have testosterone as their predominant hormone that's coursing through their brain. That makes them visual. And men like also like the fun, like they say it over and over again. My wife used to be so fun. It used to be da da da. Brock talks about that. Jax talks about that. It's like part of feminine energy to be fun and like sensual. There's a lot of things that co-create like male female dynamics, no matter what gender or like sexual orientation. But I don't think that Brittany's just like, this is what I want. I want my baby. I want my kid number 2. And then there's no like, kind of understanding. I don't see Brittany like listening. I don't see either one of them listening to each other very well. And I also think that if you go away to have a romantic weekend, you get a babysitter or weekend or whatever at a hotel and maybe just a night, like do your hair, like just like try to be sexy. Don't talk about like, we know about baby number 2. We know what you want. Just like it should be about them connecting.
Also, maybe leave the cameras at home too. It's so performative.
Right. Like, or just like have dinner and then they could go away and then you could talk about it the next. So, but it's also indicative of like what is going on. Right. I mean, they ended up fighting and, I think most of us have had fights like that where you're really trying and then just ends up being another fight. So there's a lot there that needs to be worked through, obviously, and hasn't gone well from what we know. That hasn't been shown yet in the show.
Yeah, all relationships, like you said earlier, go through ups and downs, and like you don't almost like all couples will fight. That's part
Of course,
of growing together or
it
seeing
is.
how you grow together. The last topic I wanted to bring up, and this has just been so mind blowing as always, is that we talk a lot about mental health care in terms of Bravo now in these shows, because man, they really do go through so many things, like
Mhm.
Tom, Ariana, everybody on these shows goes through something across the board. You know, would it be like, would it be helpful to have a mental health care professional on set? So like, after they film these things, somebody can talk to somebody immediately. Is that ridiculous? When you watch these shows, is there ever something, a thought in your head of like, this is what they should do at the end of these explosive scenes?
I think, yeah, I definitely think they should do that. But here's the the kind of like duality behind that is these shows are thriving off of people kind of being unwell and
Personal
the
pain. Yeah.
drama. And but at the same time, these like on these reality shows, people love them because they've gone through these things, or are currently going through, certain things like this, or they know someone that we know, a Kristen or a Jax or someone like that. So I agree with you. Yes. Or like have a professional. And I've seen some on some reality shows where they bring in like a coach, or like Michelle and Jesse are trying to do. And
Yeah.
so I do think that, yeah, they're
I'm
should
saying
be
like an
more of that.
off-camera coach, not even
Yeah.
the thing that gets filmed, but like an off-camera, like things put in place, because, obviously these are really big, emotions that they're going through, like, and some could argue that there was probably a psychotic break with
Mhm.
Sandoval at some point when he got caught doing this stuff. And I just wonder, but if that's one of those things that releases the tension that they're so desperately trying to get on film.
Right. That's the thing. It would kind of quell the drama. So I think it'd be good for their mental health, but would it be good for ratings or anything
Yeah,
else?
yeah,
Yeah.
I know. It's like, well, that's what I mean. Like, I made fun of Jax for so many years, and then you see him on the show, and he's just such a goof sometimes that you're like, I love watching this guy. Like, I don't even know what it would be like to watch a well-adjusted Jax Taylor, because I'm so used to that pattern. Like, it gives me endorphins when I watch him be a goof, you know?
And then, even if they wanted to, actually, now that I think about that, if Bravo was like, okay, we are hiring someone offset, and it's just something that, well, that's kind of actually interfering with
The
the
reality.
reality. But if, as part of the show and their lives, if it's like, okay, well, I'm bringing in so and so to help us with, okay, like I could see that being the case, because that's more, and then you could actually see maybe some stuff getting processed on the show in real time. I think that would be more, I think it'd be more like engaging for people, or there would be more continuity to the content, instead of all of a sudden in the next episode they're like, oh, I'm chill, I'm good now, talk to
Yeah, I
someone.
know.
Okay.
All good, all good. Yeah, we're good in the season. Tom Sandoval did an interview with the New York Times a couple of months ago, and it was just so horrendous in so many ways. But there was a piece of it that really fascinated me, was that he talked about how he lives his life like 3 different times, and it's all involving filming. Like once when he films something, once when he does the talking head talking about what he filmed, and then once he relives it when the audience gets it.
Mhm.
And he even made reference to he'll do that even when they're not filming. He almost lives his life now like he is constantly filming. Like, he is just, editing scenes in his head. And I just thought, man, this guy needs to be studied in some way. But after you've been on reality television for 11 seasons and you've made that, like, and it's exploded in the way that it has, how do you ever get away from this and learn how to live real life and touch grass and stop thinking about your life as a television show?
I think it's really difficult. I think that's why, like with the Kardashians, and then, Kim really not wanting the show to end. I think it's the same with Tom. I think that those personality types are getting a lot out of the cameras being around all the time, and the attention and the adoration, and any form of attention, really. It doesn't really matter. So I don't even think Tom's like that affected by the tension being, I think he wants more positive attention. But
Yeah.
so I think that it's kind of, I don't know if it serves him, but it feels like an addiction, to like having the cameras there, and it's like, okay, I'm not relevant or this or that until the cameras are there. And so
Yeah.
Yeah, saying that. I mean, I've heard that from reality TV stars, like, you know, you're, especially if it's something traumatic. Like Chloe said that about the cheating scandals with her relationship. It's
Kristen,
kind of
yeah.
like I had to relive it again and again and again every time. And then when it gets aired again, you know, so yeah, but that's
Which, by the
used.
way, the Kardashians' new season starts in a couple weeks, and we got the Kardashian machine starting up again. So that'll be interesting to see what they share and what they've hidden away from us. Yeah, this is also fascinating. Why do you like what you do?
Well, I love transformation. I love seeing people change. Again, like on the neurological level and creating new neural pathways. That is a real thing. And that can really happen if your willingness is there. And so, you know, sometimes we just want to change. And it's always, I tell my clients this all the time. Okay, anytime you want something, it's to feel better, even if it's to avoid a pain or, you know, get some type of gain. Both of those things will make you feel better. We all want to feel better in some type of way. And then some people that are maybe, you know, on the narcissistic or, you know, malignant behavior side of things just want to numb out and not deal. But there are people that actually want to grow and change. And being part of that process to me is so beautiful. And helping people, because if you help that one person, you're helping their family, you're helping the, you know, company. I work with a lot of like C-suite level people too. So it's like that whole company is better, that whole organization. And so I love it. I love affecting change like that. And, you know, I do it with my individual work and like my courses. I have some online courses, and just being able to help people with the transformation process is the world. I don't know. I just love it.
Yeah. Are you able to watch these shows and actually enjoy them? Or is it like, oh my God, I'm picking up on so much. It's like too much. It's too much when you watch these shows.
No. Okay. So I did stop watching Vanderpump Rules because of Kristen. Like I could not, I was like, I need to get her on Instagram and fucking invoice her for like having to watch this. It was terrible. Like that's how I felt. And so
you
now
mean back on like old school Vanderpump Rules.
Yeah. And then even now, but she's just like playing herself out so much. Or maybe I just don't care as much anymore. And like, but, you know, sometimes it would be like too taxing, or I'm like, this is too dark. But if not, I just turn it off. But I do think it's a fascinating way for people to understand themselves, understand personality, especially with narcissism. It's like you feel crazy. You know, with borderline people, it's like they're crazy. They're making a fool, like Kristen type of thing. But like with the narcissistic person, it's like, wait, I'm like questioning my own reality now because the gaslighting is so intense sometimes. So I do like that there is like a light being shown on all of this stuff and people are talking about it. It seems.
So at the end of the day, there is still positive things that we can take away from this, obviously.
I think so. I think so. And a lot of people, you know, think that some of these reality stars are inspiring and hopefully use their platform to do good things.
Yeah. Well, listen, hey, Tom Sandoval's got his band. That's very positive. You also mentioned turning the shows off. I wasn't aware that we could turn these off. That's amazing. Is there a power button on the TV?
There is. I just found mine. Crazy. It just shuts it, makes it black.
Wait. One last thing. You brought it and I forgot to follow up. Ariana and Dan, her new relationship. You know, obviously you say potentially there's some masking there. There's some, you know, and that's a thing that keeps getting brought up. He seems like a nice guy. He doesn't seem like he's like wanting reality show fame. It seems like he went on at the very end, probably as a favor to her. He seemed like he handled Tom Sandoval well, but at the same time, maybe not Ariana, but in, you know, other relationships where you get into a relationship fairly quickly after a big blow up. What does that usually mean? And I don't mean that this is what's going on with Ariana, but in your profession, what have you noticed with that?
Yeah, like the classic rebound type of situation. I mean, I do feel like it's a way to anesthetize like everything. And I don't think that's always
That's not bad, right? Yeah.
But I do encourage my clients that are doing something like that to just be aware and maybe make the other person aware. Like, hey, I'm recovering from something. Let's take things slow and just be like light and everything while I'm healing from this. There's that, which I think is a good, mature, healthy response. Or it's just like, I'm in love with you, to kind of like I feel James did with Ali. Like, I'm just going to transfer all of my whatever onto you and project all these things. And make my ex jealous, like that
Yeah,
type of thing.
love bombing in a sense, right?
Yeah. And so, yeah, you just got out of that. Now you're going to love bomb someone else so you don't have to feel any type of pain. And that's actually like what Kristen does a lot. Like she got out of that one relationship that she felt very hurt by, meet someone a week later, and now she's going to have babies with this guy that she kind of, anyway, that's a whole different thing. But so I just think that if you're being slow and healthy about it, you know, I don't think you need to go and live in a cave for a year or anything. It's fine to date, but just keep it in perspective, because you want the healing. You don't want to get stuck at one of those stages of grief. You want to actually heal and find that relationship where you can have that secure attachment.
Well, you've done it again. Man, you've got to come on way more. This has just been so helpful for me, and it's been such great to have a language in which to speak about this. I'm going to put all of her information up, but just once again, her website is laurenclaytonhealth.com. You can find her on, laurenclaytontotalhealth.com. God. And then her Instagram is mental health hacker. And you know, we can poke around on this website, and is there potential, like if people want to, could they work with you?
Oh, absolutely. The best way to get a hold of me is via Instagram. Just DM me. And also I have courses available. I have a course on imposter syndrome. And that is, if you don't know what imposter syndrome is, it's like this form of anxiety where you feel like any success you haven't earned, and you feel like a fraud. And like, you know, we talked about this.
Yeah, very aware.
Yeah, you're like, yes. And then my other one, this is why I was so excited to talk about this, is about recovering from a narcissistic relationship or narcissistic abuse.
Oh, wow.
So if you look in my bio, it's on my website, but if you click in my bio, you'll see all like those two courses. And yeah, and everyone.
Yeah, I know certain producers of Vanderpump Rules listen. Would you ever consider being on Vanderpump Rules for an episode? If say
absolutely.
Ariana or Katie, you know, and you could, you know, walk them through narcissistic abuse, you would do that?
Oh, absolutely. It's like, I'm just so passionate, especially the narcissistic abuse stuff or anything that involves a large amount of transformation, which it does if you allow it to. If you don't stay in that angry state, it could be the best thing that happened to you, which sounds like an oxymoron. Sounds not true, but.
Well, that's why I'm excited to see where Ariana goes from this. I'm excited to see where they all go. And I'm so happy that they're taking an extended break instead of rushing into filming again, because I feel like everybody needs to figure out who they are away from cameras. And, you know, it's one thing to have all of these things happen in real life, but then to add all of us on top of it with the cameras, it's just got to add so much more to it. And I'm sure they get benefits and money, but man, it has got to be a mind F on top of a mind F. So, Lauren Clayton, my God, fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. I really love this.
So fun.
Yeah. So I will hopefully talk to you again very soon.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it.